have a voice too, and proposition wants them to be heard. We believe that people under 30 refer to youth who tend to share new perspectives from the rest of the population. This is because they have lived largely under different economic climates, post the 2009 financial crisis, for instance, where economic growth has stagnated. When new crises that impacts can only be seen in the distant future, like climate change or the new age of technology, directly impacts people under 30. Simply because of their age, they may be recently graduated from college, for example, and still servicing student loans as well. What can youths do in Parliament? First, they can bring forward new pieces of legislation and bills that they write themselves. 2, they can vote on legislation that is brought forward by other members in Parliament. 3, they can voice their concerns, debate about new policies, share their views as a representative in Parliament. Our policy, therefore, is that we will reserve seats in Parliament for candidates under 30. This is done through a quota for youth proportional, no thank you, to their size in the population. We will then fill this quota by having the vote specifically in a general election for youth candidates only. So recognize that we are expanding Parliament for one section that is specifically for youth in the population. The outcome of elections determines the youth that will fill these seats. The policy is therefore democratic because youths are still voted in and must have the popular mandate of the people in the election. Obviously, youth can also run in open elections and get voted beyond the youth quota that is set up in the expanded Parliament, but my arguments will show why this is largely unlikely and we need that quota on our side. My first argument will be on restoring democracy, and my second argument will be on how youths can enact change, while my second speaker will talk about breaking present political paradigms. First argument on restoring democracy. And the thesis of this argument is that reserving seats in Parliament for candidates under 30 fixes a democracy that is currently distorted. Premise: democracies around the world are undergoing a crisis. The younger generations, people under 30, are highly disillusioned with systems of democracy because they are structurally shut out of participation for 2 reasons. The first is because very few youths and incumbents right now are in Parliament. They are shut out of incumbent advantage, of established voter bases, of political campaign and funding by old boys club and old guards and political elite, which means that they are less likely to be voted in altogether and they choose to give up on running. The second reason is because they are often smeared by older politicians, where age is used as a tool by older politicians to keep themselves in power, when they dismiss youths that run against them as unqualified, inexperienced, and naive. No thank you. This looks like Fox News and Republican politicians shutting down young Democrats like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, even in the most liberal of democracies, purely on the basis of her age. These 2 reasons that I just presented show that the monopolization of democracy and discourse by the old guard and political elite means that the democracy of today, of status quo, is not fulfilling its role of adequately representing people in society. What is our solution? When we reserve seats in Parliament for people under 30, we eradicate political apathy amongst them for the overarching institutional reason that we level the playing field and we tear down structural barriers that the old political elite has created. Hold on a moment, sir. We have more people running for office on our side under 30 when they know that they have a chance to win because they have seats reserved for them, when they have the ability to participate in Parliament, when they begin to realize that they are on equal footage as older parliamentarians whose voice will now hold the same weight because they operate in the same office. But before I move on, yes sir?
Will you ban people over 60 from voting?
No, we think that in democracy, everyone should be represented in Parliament. I clearly told you in my argument that people older have outsized representation, which is why we need to increase the representation of younger people to make it equal and fair in a democracy. Back to my argument. For people who choose not to run, the common youths on the ground, for example, they will begin to see more role models speaking up for them as well, having their voices heard not just on social media that they can use, but meaningfully in the House of Commons, in the Australian Parliament, where formal legislation is created and their voices are taken seriously. Recognize that Parliament is a means to an end, not an end in and of itself. The reason why we have representative democracy where people are elected in based on representation, no thank you, rather than direct democracy where people vote in direct policies, is because we value majority representation but minority rights as well. So if opposition wants to talk about democratic values, the best way to represent the people is ensuring everyone, including youth, have equal access to the halls of power and they do not self-censor, they do not shut themselves out because of the structural barriers that the old guard have created. Our reserve seats removes political apathy and incentivizes more youth to run. My second argument is on how youth can enact change. No, thank you, madam. And the thesis of this argument is that reserving seats allows the youth to enact change. Premise: there are two institutional ways where we can create meaningful change when we reserve seats in parliament for people under 30. Now note that this argument is regardless of whether they are elected into office or not. The first reason, regardless of whether they are elected or not, is because they can bring new perspectives and voices to the table when they begin to run for office. Because they grew up under a different social cultural era, they have new thought processes, new ways of voicing opinions, new ways of campaigning. To be clear, we are not placing value judgments on certain specific views that the youth might hold. So whether the youth is conservative or whether the youth is liberal, we are okay. We welcome all of it because we recognize that the youth have different ways of conceptualizing their political identity from the people who are older. We give you an example. Older liberals tend to care more about universal healthcare, for example, the right for people to access medical help. But younger liberals might care more about free college education, for example, subsidized schooling for individuals who are from less privileged backgrounds. And recognize that youth can also bring entirely new views as well, not just evolution of older views, where youth are more likely to speak up on climate change, on automation, on the age of technology, and about updating legislation regarding technology, for example. We inject new material, content, and ways of explanation and delivery of existing content. This is done through our side because we incentivize youth to run because they are now guaranteed a seat in parliament with the reservation on our side. When they run in campaigns and they participate in media televised debates, for example, when they engage in discourse formally with existing politicians, older moment, sir, that is when we propel their voices into the political sphere and into the social sphere because they run on official platforms. But before I move on to my second reason, yes, sir?
They're going to represent about 7% of the parliament, and then they won't be able to change anything, thus amplifying that.
Thank you, sir. I don't think that's true. Because in my policy, I already told you that the quota for the expansion of parliament is proportional to how many youths there are in parliament and in the population. So unless you want to name a country in which the youths make up just 7% of the population, I don't think that that's a fair number that their POI is purporting. The second reason why they can enact change is because parties are incentivized to groom younger politicians. Because they are already running under the ambit of the party, but then they'll run anyway, and they will become the future face of the party. There's no reason why you would waste a seat for a younger politician. You're more likely to groom it. Where in parliament, youth can do a multitude of things. They can form crucial swing votes in bills and legislations, for example. And the second thing that they can do is in coalition governments, which is the majority of parliaments in the world today. We're looking at the Germany, the Christian Democrats, for example, who don't have a majority to form the government, and they have to court coalition governments. We're looking at the Tories in UK, for example, who do have to find the youth. And why are they more likely to take youth other than other parties? Because other parties are just opposition, and the youth are an extension of their own views or an evolution, not directly oppositional to existing parliaments. So to recap, we can have more voice and discourse, we have swing votes, and we have coalition governments that all incorporate youth into decision making. We believe that we bring the future now. We are so proud to propose.
Oh, 8 minutes, 17 seconds.
Thank you.
I thank the speaker for his remarks, and I invite the first opposition speaker to open the opposition case.
When you actually take a step back and look at a holistic picture of the status quo, political parties aren't grouped by age. They are grouped by political ideologies, they are grouped by the ideas. And if some ideas aren't represented with the status quo, some people always come through with these ideas. Under our Circuit House, we are more than proud to oppose this this notion that we would quota a number of seats in the parliament for these people, and this is something we are incredibly proud to justify throughout 3 6. Firstly, we're going to talk about how we principally and tangibly ensure democracy. Secondly, how we get better politics under our side of the house and less apathy. Thirdly, Edith in her second speech is going to talk about how those ideas under the side of the proposition are going to be less accepted in their society. What is our status? First of all, we would ensure that all countries would have preferential voting as is seen in the EU. This means that those people, first of all, choose the party they want to vote for, but secondly, choose directly their representative they want to see in the parliament, meaning that they directly give their power to this representative to be in the parliament. Notice that we do not support things such as the electoral system,
What do you
say, which already disrupted democracy in the status quo. But secondly, please notice that the burden that Singapore has in this debate. They have to prove to you why exactly is 30 the age under which they would be quotas to the people, not for instance 32 or 35. But also when they tell that the young are the most important part of the society. Why are they not giving, for instance, more votes to the people who are, for instance, 30 to 40, because they have children and they have more burdens to carry in their lives. They have to inherently tell you that exactly the young ones under 30 are the ones who would get those quotas. But before going on to our substantives, first is something irrefutable. First of all, when we talk about democracy, the democracy
Point of information.
is in the crisis currently in the status quo, and then when they get quotas, now people will use ageist tool. First of all, Madam Speaker, notice that they give you no single example and no single explanation why does your seat in a parliament equal to you having political capital. This is inherently contradictory under their side of the house when they tell you that those people who are already in the parliament era and are older and already have political capital, those people still stand and those people are still left in the parliament under their side of the house. Therefore, under their side of the house, if those people, the meaning of those people having a seat does not mean that they will directly have political capital, but moreover, tell it, those who are already in the parliament now are going to be enraged that someone stole their votes, stole their seats which they would have had under the real principles of democracy, and now they are going to enact this power in the law to these people, meaning that these people aren't going to have the real political capital. But moreover, tell you that democracy is never about giving quotas. Democracy is inherently the meaning that everyone has to say no. This is going to directly clash with our first substantive point about democracy. Secondly, when we talk about how the young ones have different values, first of all, this argument already hinges on the premise that the young ones on their side of the house have political capital. We first of all already show you how they do not have political capital just because they have a seat, but moreover, they will never form a majority. Therefore, they aren't inherently going to be able to enforce these policies under the proposition. Secondly, when you talk about, but young liberals want to actually, for instance, talk about student loans and want to talk about the welfare system, yes, some other people like Bernie Sanders, for instance, also want to talk about these ideas. This is not the problem of age. If those ideas are already existing in the societies, but moreover, lastly, we tell you, under our side of the house, if some ideas are not represented in the status quo, those people will come to the political stage and represent those ideas. As is seen here by the example of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, they themselves give you, she is a woman which came into politics with no lobbying power, she had no political capital in the first place, but she simply came through when people wanted her to come through, when people needed someone as her to represent their ideas. Notice that first of all, this argument cannot stand since it hinges on the premise that those people inherently have political capital on their side, but secondly, those ideas are already existent and they never show you how they are inherently something which is hinged upon the number of age. We think that Singapore never proved it. Now on to our first substantive point about democracy. Please notice that this clashes directly with their substantive point. Notice that democracy, I think everyone in this room can agree, is the best political system that we can have. Why is that so? First of all, because the most amount of people we can have get the most amount of votes, and they
Point of information.
They have a say. But secondly, democracy is important because every single person gets a say. Now notice what you need to have to ensure democracy is a parliamentary representation. What does that mean? This means three things. First of all, that every single vote is heard and that every single vote is equal. Secondly, that everyone gets the same power. And thirdly, when you talk about the state, this idea still stands. Because when we think about why we even made the parliament in the first place, we made it by giving our part of power, our part of sovereignty, to make the parliament for the people to represent us. Therefore, if you go by this principle that every single one of us gave the same amount of our sovereignty and our political power to the parliament, hence, by this logic, every single person must have the same vote in the parliament in order for democracy to be ensured, in order for representation to be ensured and actually under our state. And notice how side proposition disrupt this. Notice that we have when they have quotas, what inherently happens under their system is that take away, for instance, the 30% of people who got the least votes, but still would go into the parliament under our side of the house, and completely take them out and replace them with people who are younger, with people who got less votes than those people under our side of the house. Notice that this inherently means that a lot of people's voices are not taken into account. If you remove the 30% of people who actually would go into the parliament under a real democracy as a side of the opposition's democracy, this means that under their side of the house, not everyone is heard. This means that the majority doesn't have the power, that not all votes are the same, and thirdly, the representation isn't fulfilled, meaning that side proposition under their side of the house completely disrupts the core principle of democracy. But moreover, we thought that the impact of this is that first of all, people cannot trust the system. This can badly be seen in the USA when they have the electoral system, and for instance, when more people voted for Hillary than for Trump, when democracy was disrupted by this idea of the electoral system, people were already angry because no two votes were the same in that election. Although I voted for Hillary, for instance, and more people voted for Hillary, our voices weren't heard because of the electoral system which disrupts democracy. This is the same under their side of the house. But secondly, this creates the slippery slope for the government to restrict this democracy. By taking away, for instance, more power from other groups in the society. Maybe the next step under their side of the house is going to be, for instance, to give more power, even more power to the young ones and take away the power from everyone else in the society. Secondly, how to get better politics under our side of the house. Notice, first of all, that under their side of the house, the majority of the people in the society are underrepresented. They know that their voice is not heard in the status quo because those people who they voted for are taken completely away from the parliament. This inherently means that those people are, first of all, underrepresented, but secondly, they have no structural incentive to vote because they know that even though those people would go in the parliament in a real democracy, their voices aren't going to be heard. They are simply going to be replaced by the young people by this quota. But secondly, notice that when we get a majority which is now angry at those young people taking away places from them, this inherently means that they are more likely to enact policies and gain their political capital which already have in their status quo and enact it to go against the policies of those young people, meaning that they are going to use lobbying. For instance, they are going to all of them work together just not to let the young people actually have votes, meaning that they again have no political power. This means that the young people, even under their side of the house, are the ones who are disincentivized from voting because they know that even if those young people go to the parliament because of the quota, they have no political capital under their side of the house because of the old ones. Notice what I'm saying in this way. Please look at the holistic picture. It's not about age, it's about ideas. If you want to have real democracy and if you want to have better politics, well, it's both side opposition.
I thank the speaker for his remarks, and I invite the second speaker for side opposition to continue the proposition case.
Not only was first opposition literally fear-mongering throughout his entire case, he completely missed all of Matthew's analysis. Because if you listen very carefully to what Matthew told you, you would realize that first opposition was rebutting a phantom case. We were very clear with our policy. Our policy did not entail taking votes away from some subsections of the population. Our policy was that we would expand Parliament to include new voices into the equation. And the reason as to why this policy is so consequential is because of the fact that it takes out all of their arguments of how we take away political capital, especially when people are angry. It rebuts all of their arguments about why exactly this policy is unrepresentative. But before that, I also want to clarify exactly why the age is 30. I think often when governments draw policies, we often draw policies based on the line of best fit. But you know what? Even if this was the case, we would be more than happy if it was relevant to expand this quota or talk about, for example, people under the age of 40. But until side opposition can explain to us why this is analogous, we need to have a discussion about the status quo and the motion that is behind us here. So 2 questions in this speech. First, on the principles of representation, and second, on political capital. This argument was completely unresponded to by their side. Matthew gave 3 reasons as to why we would be able, and why the youth in Parliament would be able to have a voice, and it was not responded to. But first, on the principles of representation. Their case was premised on the idea that we take away votes. But our argument was counter to that. We were very, very clear. Democracy currently does not represent the majority of people in the status quo, and they miss out a massive subsection of the population. Matthew gives to you structural reasons as to why the youth are not represented in society. Reasons, for example, like political and economic coalescing. That means that only the rich are able to run for power, or only, for example, the fact that those who are older with more time on their hands or more money on their hands are able to lobby, run for office, or even vote or take part in politics. He explains to you why this is a vicious cycle. When the youth are underrepresented in society, they become disillusioned with the political system and they don't vote. What was the response that we got to this very sophisticated line of logic? The only response that we got was, it's about ideas, not people. Yes, but the life experiences that people have defines the ideas that they eventually get later on in life. Matthew gives you a very good example of this. Yes, Bernie Sanders does talk about climate change, he does talk about university education, but you know what? We need more than one senator in order to make a difference. We need a new group of individuals to enter, all with new life experiences that are important. And I think it's relatively intuitive to say that the life experiences that people have that surround their lives impact the way that they act. A good example of this, for example, would be if I knew that in the future jobs like conventional work would be out of place because of automation, that is something that's incredibly important to me. And the youth being able to vote on such policies for themselves and have candidates represent those points of view is a fundamental principle of democracy that we were incredibly clear about. Matthew also explains to you why we were able to get this amount of people, because more people would be willing to listen and less people would be able to be shut out of the political system. So to be clear, if they want to talk about people not trusting the political system, I suggest that currently happening in the status quo with over 30% of people in America, 20% in the United Kingdom. Second question then, on political capital. Matthew gives you 3 structural mechanisms as to why. The only response that we got from all of this was, people would demean the youth because it's such a small percentage. The first response is, in many countries around the world, they are proportional, and that's not a very small percentage. But the second response is, in many parliaments that are very tightly contested, often swing votes are very important. Just look at the United States Senate in the status quo, where literally votes are split between 51 Republicans and 49 Democrats. I think that even having 3 senators on your side will make a massive difference in the kind of policies that you are able to pass. But second, Matthew talks to you about coalition governments in precisely the kinds of proportional representation systems that they want to implement on their side of the house is especially important. And we explain to you why youths on our side will be more than willing to be included into the coalition government. The third response that we get is, the third response that we have, which is already in Matthew's argument, was, if you're a political party, and now your stranglehold power has been broken because youths have been introduced into the political system, and now there is a youth in parliament who is affiliated with your party, you kind of have the incentive to train him because of the fact that he is part of your party now. You have the incentive to say, look, here's the new face of our party, here's a reason why you should vote for him. Because even people and the senior members of a party want more people to vote for someone if they want to get consolidated power in the first place. So on our side, politicians do have an incentive to train this new group of people. They do have an incentive to cultivate them and explain to them the machinations of a political system. But the fourth reason as to why it's important is because we get more voices on our side of the house when more youths enter and validate what's being said. But before that, sure.
If you want people to be heard, why don't you give them extra votes before electing and don't implement the quotas?
Madam, the reason as to why is because currently young people are underrepresented. We're trying to at least make them represented in the population in the first place. Now, I'm now going to move on to my team's third and final argument about breaking the present political paradigm. The thesis of this argument is that youth politicians bring in new ideas and perspectives that help change the way that we look at politicians. The premise of this argument is that there exists a number of problems with the present political paradigm that we require new voices and new ideas to bring. A good example, there are three ways in which this is done. The first is on crossing the political divide. Often, new ideas and cross-pollinations occur. A good example of this would be the rise of, say, pro-life youth, but also many who at the same time care about welfare and free college tuition. Often, an intersection of ideas in singular individuals who often think that many things are only associated with the right or only associated with the left. The problem with this is that often, the way that the media portrays most political battles is directly between a set of policies on the right and a set of policies on the left. We think that a new group of people with new ideas breaks this trend, because now they're able to break what many of the media think, or many of the media currently show to people, which is that if you are a Republican or a Democrat, you can only think of ABC policy. A good example of this would be the status quo, where many Republicans are becoming increasingly pro-choice because of new experiences that they've had, but are still willing, for example, to stand by other policies that they think are important to them. The second way in which we change the political paradigm is based on lobbying money, and recognize that we accept that there is an increasing trend against lobbying. Because the problem is that in the status quo, with many politicians that currently run their entire careers based on it, it's incredibly hard to give up. So yes, it would be incredibly politically popular to give up on lobbying money, but the problem is that they take a massive risk at the point in which they're not sure whether or not their campaigns will be able to survive based on personal donations alone. The flip side of this is young people who have no such track record. This means that they have no track record of friendships with lobbyists, or even the revolving door where lobbyists become politicians and politicians become lobbyists. This breaks personal ties, but also breaks the lobbying power that is incredibly important because it blocks so many policies that people currently want and need. And this new money that new politicians are able to enter based on campaign donations is an incredibly important way that we break the political paradigm. The third way in which we do this is based on crucial and pressing issues. Here, things like automation and climate change are incredibly important, but in the status quo, they are often seen as one of many other issues when they really should be a priority for us in the status quo, and use them as an incentive to figure out new ideas. So for example, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's Green New Deal, which pushes frontiers in the way in which we ought to see our societies and changes core and fundamental infrastructure, creating new ideas that we would not have otherwise been able to see. So to be clear, we have a crisis in our democracy, we solve it on our side, we get new ideas. We bring the future now, we're very proud to propose.
8 minutes, 17 seconds.
Thank you. I thank the speaker for his remarks, and I invite the second opposition speaker to speak in opposition, please.
The reason why proposition cannot hold this debate is because they do not stand behind their principles. They want to give votes for young people, but when we asked them, would you give extra voting for those young people, they said no. So if you want to give them votes, actually make them have more impactful choices, but I will talk about this later. Firstly, what I will talk about is that their entire case lies on the premise that change will be made, that these people will be influential. That's the first thing I will tackle. Secondly, I will tackle political capital. I will talk about new ideas and will they be hard to implement, and then strengthen our arguments about democracy, backlash, and then talk about political apathy and new ideas in the society that they generate through them. Okay. First of all, in their model, they told you that you will have two times to vote, which means everyone votes, even for young people, for these young people in parliament. So I ask you, why old people vote for those young representatives too? How can you prove to me that they will not vote for traditional choices? And this is the problematic.
Point of information.
No, thank you. This is the whole wrong premise that all young people have something that bonds them together and that they have shared idea. They do not. They also have more conservatives. For example, you can see an example of people in Orlando shooting. There are many people who are actually that are actually pro-gun, which means there's young people that will have more traditional ideas that will want to represent, and then again you change nothing because old people vote for them too. You did not give your young you get no change. Second of all, when we gave you example of Bernie Sanders, no thank you, we wanted to show you that there is nothing exclusive to age, but something exclusive to ideas you propose. And we agree that there should be someone more than Bernie Sanders, but then we should let all the people vote for such representatives and not give more space to twice vote for same traditional conservative people. Secondly, I wanted to see, and please, this is very important, a huge contradiction in their case. They say that old people in the parliament do not respect, no thank you, young representatives. How will that change? So you have quotas proportional to the part of society, which is minority. There is minority of people between 18 and 30. And somehow, majority will once respect them, especially when they know that those young people are in parliament only because of quotas. They never change that. And since the respect is the only thing that will make those actual laws pass, you should never believe that any changes will be ever made. And this makes their entire point clash. We understand that new ideas are important, but they never achieve it. Okay. And now we will talk about...
Point of information.
Before that, yes.
My first argument already told you conservative youths have new ways of thinking about traditional issues that deserve to be heard. Please deal with our actual case.
Okay, I can see how this changes my point about how older people will still not respect your ideas. Okay, first about democracy. We told you that the principle of democracy is that you have to not put your second choice or third choice. You have to have as many people you want to vote for. And since you have quotas, that means you significantly have one choice less. Second of all, I told you that older people are still richer. They still have stronger political power and lobbying behind them, which means your solution does not change the problem. These people will still be much, much stronger. I tackle this. I want to tell you, we should not embrace the principle of democracy, which is government can never choose who gets in the government, in the parliament. And by having quotas, it's exactly that. And because of the harm that can potentially cause, that because of the same reason why president cannot choose who's in the Supreme Court, we can never allow the system to support its own self. It always has to be the people voting. Thank you. We never refuted this. Second of all, about the backlash. I already tackled this important part. I told you that, first of all, there will be, no thank you, young people that will be still traditional if you want to say that old people vote for traditionalists. Second of all, I told that in parliament ideas will not even have the chance to pass because the majority will stop them. And now, what about even if they somehow pass these new ideas? There will be something called political apathy. Even more, when people know they voted for young people that they thought will solve all their problems, and now they see even when we do this, nothing changes because lobbying is so hard, we don't have enough people, and so on. Which means their political apathy is not changing their side, actually it's even worse. We want to then on our side actually make people vote even for older people like Bernie Sanders that will make their ideas push through. This is the impact we want, and this is how you actually move away from political apathy. They are even worse.
Point of information.
No, thank you. Okay, now on my last incentive about view of this group of people. Okay, in order to have impact in society, you have to be respected. And how are you respected? When you get through it by your own work. And when they give you example of AOC, that's a perfect example. Thank you for that. She is young. She worked as a bartender, and everyone tells her that. She has no experience. They tell her that. But the only thing she has, because she doesn't have any lobbying, only thing she has is that she got her because of the will of the people. And once you take that away from her, once someone can tell her, well, you're incompetent because you're here only because of quotas, she has no power. That's how new ideas are never pushed through. That's how Green New Deal will never be pushed through. That's when people start being frustrated because they're never seen as capable. And we can see this trend not just in parliament, but in society, that old people tell you, oh, you're young, you know nothing about life. And old people that are actually creating this pollution are not listening to us that who live in that world. And we cannot even worsen this case. We have to work in order to make people less politically, have less political apathy in order to vote for younger people. If there is such will for new ideas, they will vote. And we can see that today. We can see that trend. And in order to make older people see that we're capable, that we're strong, that our ideas matter, we have to push through it on our own. And our representatives have to represent that too. That that we push through on our own, that we deserve money too, that we do not need a pile of lobbying behind us to get our ideas pushed through. And now I will sum up the important things why Proposition didn't propose their motion. First of all, they never showed what is exclusive to young people, and I showed you there is nothing exclusive to age, there is something exclusive to the view. And this is important because they showed you there will be conservative young people that will go to parliament. And if they say that old people vote for those people who are conservative, even though they're young, then nothing changes on political structure. Secondly, I showed you a huge contradiction that they never tackled, that if older people in parliament have more lobbying and more respect between each other, then the impact of these young people will never be heard, and even worse, they're perceived as they're only here because of quotas. Never change the core of the problem, and therefore you should not believe that new ideas will even pass. Another important thing, if the new ideas are not passed, even though society wants them to, and that's even if we take them at their highest ground, that will create political apathy because they have the image that we've done everything we can. We have young people and still our ideas don't push through. And most importantly, new ideas that are good have to earn respect. And you can do it only when someone cannot tell you that you're here only because of quotas. Thank you.
8 minutes, 11 seconds.
I thank the speaker for the remarks. I invite the third speaker from the opposition to continue proposition.
Before I begin, let's just address the so-called principal concession the second speaker wanted to talk about. The POI from opposition was, why don't we just have 2 votes for youth? We were very clear in Garrett's response. We told you that having 2 votes for each youth voter was meaningless if no youth candidates were going to run. We need people under 30 to even run as a candidate so they can vote for politicians who represent them. We need that reserving seats uniquely incentivizes people to run. So don't let them say that our policy isn't unique. We told you about the structural barriers to entry for youth politicians, something that they haven't responded to down the line. That's why our policy is unique. Secondly, we agree with their whole principle of one person should get 1 vote. There was no disagreement on this principle. I think that's exactly why this policy is not something we stand for. This is not, the debate is not about giving them more votes. The debate is about having more available candidates. Don't let them strawman our case. I have 2 points of contention. First on representation and democracy, second on better governance. I'm going to spend less time on the first category because the majority of the material that Matthew brings you still stands at the end of the debate. So first, on representation and democracy. Garrett tells you that the main case in their first speaker was rebutted by our policy of expanding parliament because we don't take away anyone's say and because no one is enraged that their seats are stolen. I think they realize that there's no response in second speaker except to merely repeat the logic of their first speaker. So don't let them collapse back on this in third speaker because we think that we don't enrage anyone, we don't take away seats, we don't take away votes. But moreover, let's add another layer of response. We think that all the youths for whom the seats are reserved still need to be voted in by the people. So we still have a democratic mandate. That's what that response to what they say in second speaker about how the system cannot choose itself. No, the system does not choose itself on our side. People still vote for these youth candidates. So we don't compromise democracy. Second, is the comparative really one of democracy? We talked about the structural barriers to youth entering parliament. Matthew gives you a long list about barriers like all boys clubs, lobbying relations, toxic narratives that you need age to be a politician, and the vicious cycle of youths not even wanting to run. All these present in Matthew's first substantive all had no response down the line. I think it's a little too late in third speaker. So to be clear, they don't stand for democracy. They stand for an insidious caricature of democracy that makes the powerful more powerful. Don't let them say the comparative is one of democracy. Then we told you about decreasing political apathy among youths. Matthew tells you that we face a crisis of democracy, where a huge proportion of our society is unrepresented and disillusioned. So on our side, structural barriers can only be overcome by reserving seats, because we break the vicious cycle of excluding youths from democracy and we win on representation. All this analysis was structural in Matthew's speech, still not responded to by their side. But you know what? Even if we don't win on democracy, we do know that democracy wasn't necessarily an absolute principle. There's a reason we don't have a direct democracy where each individual just votes for policies. There's a reason we have a parliament, because we realize that parliament is a means to an end to represent the people. Insofar as on their side, a huge proportion of the society is unwilling to vote and there's no faith in the legal system, we think that their side doesn't protect democracy at all. So we win on representation, we win on democracy. Second contention on better governance. We give you mechanisms for how youth get greater political capital on our side. And let's just note that they've been really flip-flopping on their characterization. They started this debate by P.Y. Matthew and saying that there was 7% of youths Holoman in the country. But sometimes it's 30% when it's convenient for them. We think there's a spectrum of countries. Many countries around the world do have a very large proportion of youths, especially in the developing world. We don't think it's necessarily a small proportion that they want to be characterized. Sure.
Saying that quotas do not harm democracy, it's like saying that President can choose Supreme Court just because he's not making the final decision that Supreme Court has.
Thank you. No, voters still choose these candidates on our side. So Matthew was very clear about our policy. Yes, there will be a quota for youth candidates, but every youth candidate who gets into that quota must still be voted in the general election. Don't let them say we are nominating anyone for this. No, the people still get to vote. Matthew was extremely clear on this. So back to what I was saying. We told you that youth actually have a significant proportion of votes in these countries. But even if it's not a majority, they can still get political capital for two structural reasons we gave you right at the top. First, in the short term, youths in parliament get political influence by several mechanisms. We told you about how swing voting in the US or coalitions in the UK and Germany. We think that these are extremely important to get your voice heard by voting for policies. But even if your vote is in the majority, your ability to vote on policies, the ability to make speeches, the ability to introduce new bills and set the agenda for what is discussed in parliament, that is already a huge mechanism on our side to discuss the issues that you care about. We think that this mechanism was unresponded to down the line. The second structural reason for getting political capital we gave you was that in the long term, parties have the incentive to groom younger politicians. So given that we have these mechanisms, we think that we do have the political capital, and this responds to that whole argument in second speaker about political apathy. No, we don't have political apathy because we think that these youths will be successful in pushing their agendas once they get into parliament. So why is this political capital so valuable? We give you three structural reasons right from the top. First, Garrett's substantive talks to you about how some issues are better represented by the youth because they are directly impacted by such issues. Climate change, education policy, automation, student loans. This is just one part of a long list of issues that are better represented by the youth. The second strand of Garrett's argument was how youths are much more likely to cross bipartisan divides in polarized democracies. None of this logic responded to by the second speaker. It was fatal to their case that they refused to engage with Garrett's argument. I think it's too late to start in third opposition. The only reliant response to this was that, oh, Bernie Sanders already wants to talk about his ideas. Garrett's already responded to this. Let's extend it even further. We think we win on that because older politicians like Bernie Sanders are turning to social media and youth issues because they face competition from youth politicians, because youth voter bases are more politically active. But this has only happened in the US after decades. We think this needs to spread to democracies all around the world, and it needs to happen at a much faster pace only by our policy. Then they tried to attack this in second speaker and they said, well, you know, they only vote for conservative youths to support gun control. This is false because comparatively, we think that Garrett told you that the youths are much likely to have a much more diverse set of issues. So for example, the March for Our Lives against gun control is predominantly youth. That's not to say that there aren't some youths who support gun control, but comparatively to older politicians, it's much less. But even if it's not true, we think that conservative youths still have other perspectives. Matthew tells you about how youths have new ways of communicating, campaigning, and policy making. Like because of social and online media, for example, none of this responded to. Then they said that people would vote for these issues anyway. How? No mechanism said this is a one-line assertion from their side. Take into account all the things we told you about the structural barriers to entry why older politicians have no incentive to care for these issues. The March for Our Lives movement was so popular and over 80% of people support gun control. But still, because the NRA lobbies Republican politicians, there's no change. I don't think they can get change either. Third structural reason for why this is valuable is that echo chambers in parliament are bad regardless of these views. We think that for policy making and representation is always a huge benefit. The last thing I want to address is the second speaker substantive and this huge contradiction in our case. First of all, it's not a contradiction. Second, we think that the second speaker's substantive just isn't true, because on our side, when youths can bypass structural barriers to entry and gain a platform, that's when the toxic narrative that youths are bad politicians is disproved in the minds of the masses. So there's no acceptance on our side. But even if there was, when youth voters are much more likely to vote on our side, this more than makes up for this lack of acceptance. Third response, we think it's very hard for a political party to criticize another youth as being only there because of affirmative action, when members from your party are also part of the quota. We think there's no incentive for parties to do this. And on the final level, even if there is public sentiment that these youths are inexperienced, all the more this means that parties will start grooming these youths from young. Opposition has not responded to anything we told you on the structural barriers to entry or the mechanisms for political capital. They fail at every juncture. It's way too late to start a third speaker. We better representation and we better policy making. The time for the future is now. Very proud to propose.
Thank you, Speaker, for his remarks, and invite the opposition to continue on.
The side of the proposition took a bit of a big cake to eat. They on one side tell us, well, when in Parliament, they're going to be proportional enough to change the laws, but on the other side, when they're voting for Parliament, they can get anyone. On one side, they tell us that everyone is going to vote for those minority quotas, but for those young quotas, but on the other side, when they get into, they're just going to represent the young people. This is why all of their case holds, because throughout their three speeches, they're constantly contradicting each other and accusing us of not responding to their material, which we have much done. And that is all going to be pointed out through my speech. Firstly, about the principle of democracy. Secondly, talking about apathy. And thirdly, talking, can they make any change in the parliament? So let's start with the principle of democracy. We told you that the best thing is to have every vote mean the same. Because that's the point of democracy, to make it the best decision for everyone else. And we told you this is stealing votes from us. And just saying you're going to expand no thank you, doesn't mean you're stealing votes. Because when you're reserving a portion of a parliament, doesn't matter who expanded it. The still parliament is now going to be 50 seats, but the 50 are still taken away from the majority of the people who are over 30. That's why we're saying it's stealing votes. But even if it isn't mathematically stealing votes, people who vote see as stealing votes. And we told you that in our second law, they completely ignored that. That is why we believe, and the perception of people who are voting is important here. That is in the principle of democracy. But then they tell us young people have progressive ideas. Just because young people have good ideas, that doesn't mean that the majority has to take those ideas. Just because young people support gun control doesn't mean we should vote gun control laws. No, thank you. They have the ability to vote as every other person in the country, and there isn't a structure